Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking past curfew, leaving the chatter of the 21st century at the door, and walking straight into an Irish abbey so old the stones remember Viking footsteps. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, as always, pop down to the comments and tell me your city and the exact time on your clock. Let's see which time zone is listening from the darkest hour tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push a weather-smoothed oak gate just wide enough to squeeze through. It groans like a sleepy cello, then settles behind you with an almost gracious sigh. Moonlight paints the cloister garth in pale silver, pooling around herb beds of chamomile and rue. You move quietly because the monks are already deep into their nightly devotional marathon. Matins 2 hours past, Lord still a glimmer over the horizon, and nobody needs your boots clacking like an offbeat tambourine. The first thing you notice is the hush. It isn't silence exactly. It's a layered fabric of soft sounds, wind-fingering slate tiles, a distant owl asking its single, eternal question, and somewhere in the scriptorium a quill tip scratching like a tiny saw through silk. The abbey walls rise on either side, blocky and maternal, trapping warmth from daytime turf fires. Flecks of mica catch moonbeams, so the stones seem sprinkled with salt. You touch one, feel a centuries-thick chill, and imagine all the palms that pressed here before yours. Pilgrims, raiders, masons, stray cats using the corner for an optimistically tall scratching post. A round tower looms ahead, and you duck beneath its shadow to reach a low-arched doorway. A single beeswax candle glows behind a slice of horn window, casting a gentle amber smear across flagstones. The door is unbarred. Monks value hospitality almost as much as illuminated capitals, so you lift the latch and step inside. Parchment. Scent greets you like bread, fresh from the oven, though it's really a cocktail of stretched calfskin, damp peat smoke, and the faint bitterness of oak gall ink. To your left, long benches huddle under high, ribbed beams. A lone scribe sits at a slanted desk, shoulders wrapped in a russet wool cloak that probably smells of sheep and sea spray. He doesn't flinch at your arrival. Visitors materialize now and then, messengers, stray cats again, once even a confused seal pup that wandered inland during a storm. True abbey anecdote, noted in a 12th century margin doodle. You take a respectful step back, letting him finish a flourish that looks suspiciously like an otter cartwheeling beneath a psalm verse. Turns out monks loved playfulness as much as piety. Here's your first solid historical anchor. Early medieval Irish monasteries became Europe's copy and paste centers after the fall of Rome. They preserved Latin texts ranging from Virgil to vegetable gardening manuals because salvation covers both souls and salads. Monks sometimes copied for 10 hours at a stretch, propelled by duty, prayer, and a surprising amount of oatmeal. Historians still debate whether that legendary endurance was universal or confined to a few disciplined scriptoria with more coffee, well, chicory than average. Either way, you're about to try it. Your guide appears, Brother Cian, thin as a bookmark, eyes bright despite the late hour. He nods toward an empty desk. "The wind told me you were coming," he murmurs, a phrase that sounds mystical until you realize the wind actually whistles through chinks in the wall like someone practicing panpipes. He hands you a goose feather thick as your thumb. Trim it well, or it will drag like a plough. You sit, feeling the bench, protest your unfamiliar weight. A terracotta lamp flickers nearby, its oil scented faintly with rosemary to keep gnats away. Brother Cian places a small knife beside you, the quill knife, half tool, half tiny sword. The blade curls inward, perfect for shaving barbs and shaping a nib. He demonstrates a quick, decisive slice that leaves a neat chisel tip. Then he offers the feather to you. You copy the motion, hesitant first, then confident, shearing away downy fluff until the quill looks less bird and more precision instrument. A thin sliver of moonlight catches the new edge, and for a moment your inner perfectionist high-fives your inner pyromaniac, who simply enjoys sharp things near open flame. Obscure fact break. While goose feathers ruled mainland Europe, some Irish scribes preferred swan quills for ceremonial work, or even raven for black magic manuscripts. Those darker plumes were said to carry ink willingly, though modern ornithologists shrug. Keratin is keratin. Superstition just spices the stew. You tuck that nugget away, feeling academically fortified. Brother Cian sets a sheet of vellum before you. The calfskin gleams pearly, almost luminous, thanks to hours of pumice sanding and chalk rubbing. He draws a bone stylus across it, scoring faint guidelines no ink will ever obscure. We write on still water, he says, meaning each line must remain level in a world where desks warp, candles flicker, and time itself tends to slump leftward if unchecked. You dip the quill into walnut-brown ink, steeped earlier from crushed oak galls, rusted nails, and a dash of red wine for courage. The liquid clings like midnight to dawn. First stroke, a hesitant downward curve, damp and slightly feathery. Second stroke, cleaner, bolder. Third, your hand finds the monkish rhythm, shoulders soft, wrist loose, nib kissing vellum then sliding away, the motion equal parts writing and breathing. Gregorian chant seeps through a stone aperture high above, syllables echoing off rib vaults like doves in a bell tower. The music doesn't distract, it locks you into cadence. Each neume, a musical note, aligns with a downstroke. Each brief pause mirrors the lifting of quill to ink. You realize the chant is your analog metronome, older than quartz, steadier than caffeine. Somewhere behind you, Brother Cian chuckles, softly, and points to a marginal doodle halfway down your page, a smug frog wearing a halo. You didn't draw it. Your hand must have wandered while your mind soaked in chant. He approves. A page without joy is a jar without honey. Scholars 3 centuries later will debate whether such doodles were secret codes or simply doodles. You're voting doodle unless the frog later grants absolution. The oil lamp sputters, you tilt its spout and feed it fresh fuel from a small leather bottle. Flame settles, new shadows crawl across the ceiling, and you catch yourself smiling at how the lamp's quiet hiss matches your own breathing. Outside, that owl repeats its question. You answer with another clean line of minuscule. Hours remain before dawn, yet time has slipped its tether. You flex cramped fingers, shake out your wrist, and notice tiny ink freckles on your knuckles, constellations of your newly minted patience. Brother Cian sets a pewter mug of warm oat milk beside you, sweetened with a drop of honey from the Wye Abbey's hives. The taste is earthy comfort, a subtle reminder that even spiritual marathons run on calories. You straighten your spine, roll your shoulders, crack a grin at the haloed frog, and dip the quill once more. The page opens like quiet ocean. You breathe, you write, you breathe again. Ink flows, chant drifts, moon slides westward. 10-hour vigils seem less impossible when tackled one mindful stroke at a time. The chant fades into a gentle hum behind your ribs as you turn toward the tool rack. An unassuming strip of ash wood pierced with plump grey feathers. Each plume looks like it's still dreaming of open skies and lake water, but tonight it will trade flight for script. You choose one, the color of cloud shadow, broad enough to hold ink, yet supple enough to flex without complaint. The shaft is cool, faintly ridged, and you feel a quick thrill. This is the moment every medieval scribe calls the true beginning of a page, not the first word, but the first cut. You tuck the feather under a low rushlight to inspect its grain. Goose quills, mainstream manuals declare, outclass almost every bird when it comes to durability and ink delivery. Swan quills may be grand for diplomas and coronations, but their pompous girth tires the hand. Crow quills suit marginalia, where tiny script dances like ants. Tonight, though, you need a reliable marathon runner, and the goose delivers. That, much scholars agree on. Whether Irish monks specifically preferred geese raised on seaweed for salt-tempered keratin, however, is a matter historians still debate. Some point to hagiographies extolling coastal abbeys. Others insist the claim is just poetic seasoning. Knife in hand, you start the ritual. First, you slice away the top 2 handbreadths of barbs. Leaving them would make the quill top-heavy, like trying to write with a palm branch. Feathery offcuts drift onto the desk, and a draft from the window spins them in slow cartwheels, miniature pillows for non-existent mice. You hear, brother, Sion's approving murmur. Light hands write long. Next comes tempering. You hold the shaft near a small basin of warm sand kept by every savvy scribe. Gently, you plunge the hollow tube into the grains, letting heat kiss the keratin. The shaft stiffens, a quiet alchemy that will keep it from splintering mid-verse. A quirky side note, some Benedictine manuals suggest soaking quills in stale beer before sanding, claiming the malt adds resilience. Modern chemists shrug. They suspect the monks simply liked an excuse for ale fumes in the workshop. Blade angled, you pare the quill's nib. Slice 1, a diagonal cut reveals an oval lumen waiting to snack on ink. Slice 2, you shave a sliver off the back to flatten the belly. Slice 3, a tiny lateral snip forms shoulders, those subtle wings that channel ink forward. Last, you split the tip by pressing the knife's edge into the lumen until it whispers apart. A clean split is crucial. Too ragged, and the quill will stutter like a nervous minstrel. You test it on your thumbnail. It sings a faint, scratchy note, as satisfying as striking flint. You decide on a broad nib, good for the Irish semi-uncial script, the tall, open letters that look like they've been practicing yoga since sunrise. Brother Sion remarks that such breadth allows speed without losing elegance. Here's a historical nugget. Irish semi-uncial evolved partly because quills cut this way glide rather than jab, conserving ink and stamina across marathon sessions. Scholars still argue whether the script's rounded forms inspired later Carolingian minuscule or vice versa. The evidence is a tangle of paleographic chicken and egg. Before ink, a pause. You notice quill dust gathering at the knife's heel. Medieval scribes never wasted anything. This fine keratin powder, mixed with egg yolk, became a filler to patch pinholes in vellum. You sweep it into a horn cup, because why not add DIY vellum repair to tonight's itinerary? Now you test flex. Dip the nib into the ink pot, drawing just enough to darken the cut. On a scrap of vellum you curve a simple letter A. The nib bows, then springs back, leaving a stroke that swells and thins like tide meeting sand. Perfect. Second letter, third. Each flows smoother until the scrap fills with playful loops, a flock of geese turned into glyphs. Candlelight flickers, and you catch the feathers' remaining barbs, shimmering bronze. Medieval illuminators sometimes tinted quills with saffron water for easier ownership tracking, a medieval version of labeling your coffee mug. You don't dye yours tonight, but the idea that scribes might brag by color-coding feathers tickles your imagination. Picture a scriptorium where purple-tipped quills strut like peacocks and novices trade them like collectors' coins. Hand cramps threaten, so you pause and flex fingers against the cool stone ledge. Brother Tian offers a smear of lavender and comfrey salve, standard monastic muscle rescue. The scent is sweet, earthy, and almost modern. You feel tension melt like wax. Another odd footnote: some monks swore by rubbing eel oil into their knuckles. Records note its warming vigor, but modern readers mostly note the smell. Your lavender option feels luxuriously civilized. Ready again, you align the freshly cut nib with the guidelines on your main vellum sheet. The first official letter, blossoms. A tall, proud D, its curved back, wide as a harp frame. The quill releases ink in steady rhythm, like a tiny, well-trained rain gutter. You ride the momentum, joined lines forming a silent chant parallel to the audible one echoing from the choir loft. Hours loom ahead, but the hardest part, the preparation, lies behind. Your quill stands primed, your hand tuned, your mind comfortably nested between candle glow and Gregorian reverb. Brother Cian nods, satisfied, then returns to his own desk where a swirl of gilt invites dawn. Ink pools, nib hovers, chant guides. You exhale, coax the next letter forward, and time resumes its gentle unraveling across velvety calfskin. A hush settles the instant you lift the vellum sheet, as though the entire abbey inhales with you. The calfskin feels cool, supple, neither paper-thin nor bulky, more like the quiet between raindrops. You angle it under the lamp, and tiny ripples glint where the animal's muscles once flexed. Suddenly the page feels startlingly alive, an ex-calf waiting to trade pasture stories for psalm verses. You run a finger along the grain, sensing faint ridges that will guide ink like secret rails beneath a city. Most people lump parchment and vellum into one dusty dictionary entry, but tonight you learn the mainstream fact. Parchment can come from sheep, goat, or calf, while vellum, strictly speaking, is the premium calfskin variety prized for flexibility and luminous color. Irish scriptoria adored it because the local damp turned sheep hides blotchy, while calves, blessed spring lambs, offered smoother palates. Whether monks deliberately bred lighter-skinned calves to improve manuscript contrast is a question historians still debate. Some charters hint at selective breeding, others chalk it up to lucky genetics and wishful scholars reading between too many hoofprints. Brother Tsiang produces a pumice stone and a cloth bag of chalk dust. You watch as he rubs the surface in gentle circles, the way a baker kneads dough before sunrise. Fine white powder blooms, filling the air with a tang of wet limestone. This gives tooth, he explains. Tiny grooves that hug ink so it doesn't skid like a startled eel. A quirky detail slips out as he works. Certain scriptoria, short on pumice, used crushed eggshell mixed with ale froth as substitute grit. The ale fizz evidently lightened the sanding load, though the pages sometimes smelled faintly of breakfast for weeks. Your turn. You take a second sheet, all thick, milk-hued promise and begin sanding. The friction warms your fingertips. Chalk floats, settling on your lashes like gentlest snowfall. Each stroke whispers a sigh, subtle yet unmistakable, and you realize why scribes claim vellum breathes. It's not poetic fluff, but the faint release of trapped oils, a last exhalation before eternal ink next ruling. Brother Cian hands you a piece of lead stylus, a strip of twine, and an oaken ruler trimmed so thin it seems liable to vanish in a sneeze. Irish scribes favor dry ruling, faint lines impressed rather than colored, ensuring the text's skeleton guides the flesh yet never shows through the skin. You anchor the twine at the upper margin with a bone awl, pull it taut to the lower edge, and score a light crease. Repeat steady breaths between each pass until the sheet resembles a harp of invisible strings. Under lamp, the grooves catch slight shadows, barely there, but enough for disciplined eyes. Historical footnote marches in. Some continental scriptoria ruled with coloured ink, red or pale plummet, because it saved time during lavish multi-scribe projects. The Irish, isolated and often short-staffed, preferred the invisible method. Invisible mistakes are easier to forgive. Whether this frugality birthed Ireland's famously airy page layouts, or the layouts demanded, the frugality is, again, a merry argument among paleographers, trading letters the width of eyelashes. You sit back, flex wrists, and smell the sheet. Grassy undertones mingled with a note of peat smoke drifting from the distant hearth. It's oddly comforting, like reading a meadow. You lay your palm full over the vellum's center, feeling warmth transfer from skin to skin. Brother Cian sees you pause and nods. Know the parchment. It remembers if you rush. To prove the point, he produces a scrap, scarred with blotches, a cautionary tale. Grease spot, he says. Someone's thumbprint, never cleaned. The ink on that patch feathers outward, lines swollen like rain-soaked ink blots. A single lapse, and the page betrays you forever. You vow to keep your hands as clean as a saint's ledger. Now the vellum needs weight to relax overnight. But you have no patience for tomorrow. Brother Cian chuckles, slides a wooden board atop your ruled sheet, then sets a small stone on each corner. "Let it dream a moment," he insists. So you wander to the window slit and watch mist rolling off the Atlantic like crumpled silver cloth. A gull's cry knifes the silence, foreign and thrilling. Proof that beyond the cloister's calm, wild coasts crash on black rock. Yet inside you craft a different sea. One of script lines, steady and tidal, destined to carry meaning long. After gulls find new cliffs, the board lifted, you test the sheet's lay, flat as quiet water. Time to prick margin points, tiny pinholes marking major lines and columns. You wield the bone awl, tapping cautiously. Each prick sounds like a minuscule drumbeat on the oak desktop, syncing with your heart. Fun, obscure tidbit. Certain deluxe manuscripts hide jasmine oil inside their pinholes. When warmed by candles, the pages released fragrance to keep scribes alert. Modern restorers occasionally catch faint floral ghosts, an olfactory footnote nobody expected. You finish the last pinhole, sit back, and let satisfaction settle like dawn mist. The sheet, once calfskin, now holds invisible scaffolding ready to hoist a cathedral of words. You realize this is meditation disguised as labor. Every step slows pulse, opens lung, steadies mind, posture straightens without effort, and you're Breathing lengthens until chant and heartbeat overlap in quiet counterpoint. Scholars sometimes ask why Irish monks wrote through cold nights rather than daylight. Theories abound. Lamp control beats fickle sunbeams. Solitude after compline reduces distractions. Or maybe night offers symbolic resonance, script as starlight against darkness. The truth, as always, probably lies in the middle of the cloister, sharing tea with practicality and myth. But standing here, candle halo bathing vellum, you feel the third answer humming truest. Night hushes the world, so words can speak louder. Brother Tian places a sealed pot of ink beside you. Oak gall, brewed only hours ago. Its surface shines like liquid obsidian, but that's another chapter's story. For now, you stack your ruled sheets under a linen cloth, weigh them with a polished river stone, and stretch cramped shoulders. Fingers tingle pleasantly. Chalk, dust, snow still frecks your sleeves. You brush it away, whisper a small apology to the calf who gifted its skin, and promise to fill the page with care worthy of that sacrifice. Lamp wicks need trimming, chant drifts softer, and somewhere the owl repeats its eternal question, sounding both patient and amused. You smile back through the window's slit as though it can see, then turn, ready to coax ink beyond black into lines, so quiet they might last 1,000 dawns. You return to your desk bearing a modest trove of illumination tools, 3 stout beeswax tapers, a palm-sized scallop shell polished to pearly mirror, and a thumb-length sliver of horn scraped near transparent. Tonight's objective is simple yet vital. Lure the best possible light onto your vellum without setting either page or cloak ablaze. Monks call this geometry of fire, though it feels more like candle feng shui with a dash of optics class. First, you study the tapers. Their honey gold translucence catches stray moonbeams like amber prisoners. You roll one between fingertips. It smells faintly of summer clover and last year's buzzing bees. Mainstream monastic manuals insist beeswax burns cleaner than tallow, saving both lungs and manuscript margins from sooty freckles. Scholars widely agree, yet debate lingers over whether Irish abbeys imported southern wax or relied on local hives. Customs rolls from Dublin mention wax barrels arriving on Breton ships, but archaeological pollen studies hint at robust homegrown apiaries. The jury still hums. You set the tapers in a shallow iron stand. No fancy candelabrum, just 3 forged cups welded belly to belly, stable as a monk in prayer. Now the fun, positioning. You angle the 2 outer candles slightly forward, coaxing their flames to lean inward like gossiping friends. Between them, the center taper sits a fraction lower. This trident alignment balances shadow cones so no letter hides in gloom. Experienced scribes swear by it. Novices learn the hard way when their first folio reads like a zebra crossing. Time to introduce the shell. Its ridged interior, smoothed by sand and elbow grease, curves gently toward the candles. You lodge it upright behind the trio at a 30-ish degree tilt. The stand's back lip holds it snug. Instantly, flame halos reflect off nacreous ridges and ricochet forward in soft ripples across the vellum. The page brightens from pale milk to liquid moon. You grin, low-tech spotlight achieved. A curious historical footnote. Some scriptoria preferred concave pieces of polished obsidian to focus light. A clever hack, borrowed, rumour says, from Moorish traders. Others glued fragments of silvered glass. Behind flames, Irish monks, blessed with endless coastline, found scallop shells abundant and pleasantly symbolic, pilgrimage badges doubling as studio gear. Whether these shells truly increased brightness or merely warmed hearts is fodder for academic sidebars. You side with the warm hearts, but bright light spawns sharper shadows, and shadows breed mistakes. Enter the horn sliver. You wedge it in, front of the central flame, letting translucent amber act as a miniature diffuser. The glare softens, smoothing edges of penumbras that would otherwise stripe your vellum like tiger tails. Lacking glass windows, medieval scribes often used thin horn panes in lanterns. They filtered wind and glare in equal measure. You marvel how something once attached to a cattle skull now fine-tunes divine words. Recycling, medieval edition. You lean back, surveying the tableau. Candle trio, steady. Shell reflector, radiant. Horn screen, gentle. Geometry solved, for now. Of course, the real test arrives hours later when molten wax puddles, wicks shrink, and flames sputter conspiratorially. To prepare, you shave extra wicks from leftover candle stubs, tucking them in a small walnut shell beside your inkwell. One quick pinch with tweezers and you can re-wick mid-sentence. Minor miracle if the next bell finds you mid-tour of the Book of Job's poetic blizzards. Movement flits in the periphery. Brother Tsian glides over carrying a poppy-red clay dish of water. Without a word, he sets it near your stand. Candle Safety 101. Should flame rebel, dunk, don't panic. You thank him with nod and watch tiny ripples settle. Observant viewers may note medieval scriptoria often kept such fire bowls handy, but modern reenactors sometimes miss the detail, preferring Instagram-ready lanterns. Practicality over aesthetics, the monks would sigh. Now comes a moment of ritual. You cup your hands around the flames, feel their warmth, lick knuckles, and whisper a small blessing. Words you invent. On the spot, something about clarity, patience. No ink spills today, please. Scholars debate whether Irish scribes vocalized prayers before writing or kept silent. Some margin notes include Latin invocations, while others remain austerely blank. Tonight you choose whispering. The flames dance approvingly. With lighting stable, you revisit your ink. The pot's black mirror now flickers gold, a molten eclipse. You stir it gently with the quill, checking viscosity. Thick enough to cling, thin enough to flow. Candle heat helps maintain that sweet spot. Too cold. An oak gall ink thickens like morning porridge. A later innovation, placing ink pots in ceramic rings warmed by charcoal, traces its ancestry to these humble flame partnerships. You slide the vellum under the luminance, and the guidelines reveal themselves like ghost runes. Quill meets parchment. Downstroke, upcurve, pause. Letters appear crisp, their edges kissed by horn-softened light. The shell reflector ensures even the descenders, those loops dipping below the baseline, remain legible. You test by covering the shell with your palm. Immediately half the page dives into gloom. Shell back in place, gloom flees. Satisfied, you settle into rhythm. Hours flick by in syllabic beats measured by candle creep. Wax tears slide, congeal, form yellow stalagmites around the stand. You trim wicks as planned. The walnut shell becomes a miniature armory of cottoned soldiers. A dull cramp coils in your lower back, posture alert, but a quick stretch and lavender salve rescue the spine. Outside, wind rattles shutters. Inside, flames barely tremor, shielded by stone thick as a dragon's thigh. Midnight? Dawn? Hard to gauge. Abbey bells suspended tonight for repairs, leaving time to swim unmarked. You rely on candle length. When the trio shrank to a third, dawn could not be far. Meanwhile, new mainstream fact emerges through practice. Sustained writing under beeswax yields fewer ink blots, less soot contamination compared to smoky tallow. Modern conservation labs confirm this by spectroscopy. Monks sensed it by steady eyes. You consider adjusting the horn screen angle but hesitate. The current glow feels like a personal truce between day and night. Instead, you observe a fascinating side effect. Flecks of gold leaf waiting for later decoration rest on a tray nearby. They catch stray shell reflections and gleam faint halos across the room, tiny auroras dancing on breath currents. Catching one on fingertip, you lose minutes admiring its tremor. Maybe scribes gilded not just for piety but to invite candlelight games during fatigue hours. Historians haven't reached consensus. You now bear anecdotal evidence. Returning focus, you complete a final line as wax pools dangerously near the stand's rim. Time to snuff the middle taper, not by breath, too risky, but by pressing a brass cone over the flame. It sighs out. The outer candles suffice for cleanup. You blot your finished column with a strip of sheep wool, noting how ink already darkens from wet green to settled coffee brown. One more advantage of oak gall: it oxidizes into permanence fast enough to dodge smudge disasters. You set your quill aside, flex wrists, and finally risk leaning back to survey the result. Letters march in disciplined rows, each serifed curve. Crisp. No wax drips, no soot smears, no shadow ambush. The geometry of fire has served beautifully. You smile at the scallop shell, half expecting it to wink back. Beyond the archway, dawn's first embers blush the sky. Time soon for lords and oatcakes, but until bells ring anew, you watch candle stubs flicker lower, tiny golden ships nearing harbour. Somewhere that owl utters its last question of the night before yielding to lark song. You answer by blowing out the outer tapers in one gentle breath, a smoky ribbon spiralling upward, sketching the last line in air before dissolving into early light. The candles rest, the vellum breathes, and you turn your attention to a far less glamorous tool, your own vertebrae. 10 hours of quill marathoning demands a spine strategy, so you slide onto the low oak bench and plant your feet on a poplar footstool notched with tiny crosses, some anonymous brother's attempt at holy ergonomics. The wood still wears faint scorch marks from a long-forgotten hearth rescue. Apparently, posture is worth salvaging from flames. You straighten until shoulder blades graze the cloak's wool like flint on tinder. Instantly, a knot protests near your left scapula, a grumpy squirrel woken too early. You lean forward, elbows hovering an inch above the desk, wrists floating just shy of parchment. Irish scriptoria prized this hover stance. Wrists free, ink flow smooth, no smudgy palm heel sliding across freshly penned blessings. One mainstream fact: many abbey desks tilted at a 30-degree angle, encouraging gravity to help dry strokes, while sparing scribes the dreaded crane neck. Archaeologists find desk lips worn smooth, where countless sleeves braced but never slumped. To steady breath, you borrow the monk's squared breath drill. Inhale 4 counts, hold 2, exhale 4, hold 2. At first, it feels like counting sheep with math homework, but soon lungs expand, ribs loosen, and that squirrel of a knot curls back to sleep. A quirky tidbit emerges from Brother Tian. Some early Irish manuals recommend chewing hawthorn leaves before long writing bouts, claiming the slight numbness quiets the pulse. Modern botanists note Hawthorn contains mild cardioactive compounds. Medieval scribes simply noted, feels calmer, ink steadier. Scholars still debate whether the benefit was chemical or placebo, seasoned with piety. You reach for a thin linen strap attached to the desk's underside. Secured around your waist, it gently tugs you forward, discouraging heroic slouching. Think of it as a medieval seatbelt for scoliosis prevention. Some Benedictine houses took it further, rigging shoulder harnesses that forced upright posture. Caricatures in margins show novices trussed like sailboats, suggesting not everyone loved the innovation. The Irish, pragmatic yet less punitive, favoured the humble belt. Breath synced, posture aligned, you experiment with hand positions. The left holds the page steady, fingers splayed, nails trimmed short to avoid accidental vellum acupuncture. The right guides the quill, pinky hovering, like a poised dragonfly wing ready to land if ink blotches threaten. Between breaths, you notice a curious rhythm. Heartbeats nestle neatly between strokes, as if your body's metronome has clicked into the chant's subbeat. For a moment, everything, ink, viscosity, candle flicker, owl hush, feels orchestrated. Faint creak behind you. Brother Cian adjusts his own strap, then slides a flat riverstone under 1 foot. Shifts weight, he whispers. Turns out rotating support keeps hips from fossilizing into the bench. You find a spare stone, polished slate, cool as moon milk, and swap it under alternating heels every dozen lines. Predictable as a tide, the subtle shift prevents pressure points, medieval micro breaks before the term existed. Muscle memory settling, you revisit that knot near the scapula. It lingers, a petty tyrant. Brother Cian passes a cloth bag of warmed barley grains, sewn from surplus cloak scraps. You drape it across the stubborn spot. Heat seeps, knot size, and even quill strokes grow silkier. Another arcane note. An Irish herbal tract from the 10th century recommends hedgehog skin hot packs for similar relief. The tiny spines supposedly stimulate righteous posture. Conservationists today cringe, but a millennium ago, hedgehogs lacked lobbyists. Thankfully, barley works fine. 10 minutes later, posture feels less a chore than a silent chant. Each breath lifts sternum just enough to lighten arms. Each exhale settles quill tip onto page like a heron landing on still water. You suspect yoga teachers would approve, though they might frown at the waist belt. A small smile tugs your cheek. No modern office chair rivals this handcrafted discipline. Still, vigilance is key. You glance at the candle stand. Wax drips creep centimeters closer to wood. Instead of reaching, you shift trunk from hips, maintaining straight spine, to nudge the bowl a bit forward. Motion economy straight out of Tai Chi. Medieval scribes mastered such micro-movements long before productivity gurus coined terms. Their mantra, move less, move wisely, write more. Just then a gust slides through arrow-slit windows, fluttering the corner of your folio. Instinct says, slap it down with palm. Posture says, engage the left forearm only, preserving that precious hover stance. You oblige posture. The page settles without smudge. Small victory logged. A lull settles. You've written perhaps 1 column. Time distorts around focused breath, but each letter stands proud, unjostled by elbow sag or wrist wobble. In the stillness you recall a scholarly squabble. Some historians argue Irish monks invented a rotating scriptorium wheel, desks fixed on a central hub, to allow brief standing spells without losing line alignment. No physical wheel survives, Skeptics call it myth. The debate spins on wheel or no, or tonight your trusty footstone suffices. With muscles aligned and breath flowing, you taste a faint metallic tang, sign that concentration has slipped into mild trance. This is the quiet edge scribes chase, where body dissolves into quill, posture self-corrects subconsciously, and letters emerge like silk worms weaving noon shawls. You feel almost giddy. 10 hours suddenly seems a river you could swim twice. Of course, the body will test limits later, wrists tingling, knees stiffening. Yet for now, patience feels like a posture itself, tall and steady. You thank the barley pack, shift the waist, strap a finger's width tighter, and inhale hawthorn-cooled air. Out in the courtyard, dawn birds negotiate first solos, but inside, time kneels before discipline. Another line, another breath. The knot remains a distant memory, the spine a quiet oak. Your quill releases ink as if poured by gravity alone. You realize that posture isn't about freezing, it's about orchestrating micro-movements so small it looks like stillness. The lesson settles deeper than any lecture. Write long, live long, start with the bones. The abbey sleeps lightly, the way a cat naps, eyes half closed, yet ears pricked for the faintest rattle. You hover in that same limbo, quill steady, posture held, when the first bell note rolls through stone corridors like distant thunder softened by wool. Dong. It is the signal for the pivot between matins and the long interval toward Lord's, the moment when night stretches its limbs before surrendering to dawn. You pause, quill mid-air, and feel the sound rather than hear it. Bronze vibration passing through feet, kneecaps, spine, skull, nib, until the whole desk hums like a tuning fork. In every Benedictine calendar the day fractures into 8 canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, time chopped into prayer tapus. That much every textbook repeats, yet Irish monasteries add a local twist. Bells here resonate over wind-scoured cliffs and peat bogs, so their peals must travel farther than continental cousins. Some chroniclers boast that a single strike from Skellig Michael could call seals. From sea caves, modern acousticians politely note exaggeration, but admit Atlantic mist carries low frequencies in uncanny ways. Historians still debate whether Irish bronze mixes, often richer in tin, were engineered for range or merely reflected resource quirks. You watch Brother Cian lift a sandglass near his lamp. A narrow mouth dribbles quartz grains thin as frost, measuring roughly 30 minutes, the span between Matin's last chant and Lord's opening antiphon. Sandglasses are rare treasures in the 9th century. Blown glass is fickle, and importing Venetian bulbs costs more than 2 cows and a good blessing. Quirkier still, this one is double-nested in a carved U-frame shaped like interlocking angels, a local craftsman's flourish that makes every turnover feel like spinning a tiny hour universe. As the bell echo fades, you perform a ritual you've watched all night. Touch nib to the desk's edge, wipe excess ink on a lint-free strip of linen, then draw a miniature fish in the left margin, half whimsy, half timestamp. Brother Cian does the same on his page, except his fish wears a crozier, like a bishop. These doodles aren't idleness. They mark bell cycles for future proofreaders, breadcrumbs through the forest of hours. Some surviving manuscripts show entire bestiaries swimming along margins, a secret comic strip of time slices. Scholars try to decode whether animal choice correlates with fatigue level or psalm theme. Consensus remains slippery as, well, eels. Another bell, this one a high silver peep, not bronze, rings from the calefactory. A lad newly tonsured races past with a tray of oatcakes and small bowls of honeyed milk, monkish energy gels for the mid-vigil slump. You accept one, mindful of ink proximity, and tear off bite-sized morsels that dissolve into earthy sweetness. Mainstream fact: Irish monastic rules allowed modest sustenance during night offices, unlike stricter continental houses. The rationale? Cold Atlantic air siphons calories faster, and quills don't flourish in hypothermic fingers. Whether this leniency was codified in official rulebooks or tolerated in practice is, yes, still argued in footnotes spanning 4 journals. Sandglass exhausted, Brother Tian flips it with practiced flick. Grains leap, swirl, settle. He makes a tally mark beneath his bishop fish, 1 interval down, perhaps 19 more, before sunrise chores. You mimic him, realizing how tactile time becomes when clepsydras and candles replace digital pixels. Counting minutes by heartbeats would drive you mad. Letting bronze and sand slice the night into digestible morsels preserves both sanity and script. Outside the arrow slit, wind stirs heather ghosts. You glimpse stars sliding toward the horizon, mapping their own celestial clock. Some abbeys tracked hours by star height, nocturnal dials carved into oak, aligned each solstice. But cloud-heavy Ireland trusted bells more than constellations. A niche argument persists among medievalists over whether insular monks inherited Roman sundial schematics or reverse-engineered them from local stone circles. Evidence is tantalizingly fragmentary. Broken gnomons here, Latin glosses there, nothing decisive enough to ring a bell of its own. As you ink a capital H, the bell strikes again. 2 quick peals, the cue for brief standing prayer. You and Brother Tian rise, stretch arms skyward till joints pop like distant kindling, then bow heads. The prayer is short, a single line of Gaelic tucked beneath Latin, thanking the silent spaces between notes. You savor that phrase. Tonight's work lives inside those spaces. Seated again, you notice the sand-glass rhythm nudging your workflow. Outline letter, fill spine, finish serif, hiss, goes, grain. Another letter, another hiss. It's as if time itself collaborates, loaning a percussion track. Modern psychologists might call it flow state. You prefer the monkish term quiet scribble, a zone where quill rides heartbeat and bells ring only to confirm momentum, not interrupt it. Quirky gadget alert. Wedged between ink pots lies a candle clock, a thin beeswax column scored with horizontal marks and tiny embedded grains of fenugreek seed. Each seed pops free when melting wax reaches it, dropping onto a tiny bronze plate. With an audible plink, ingenious alarm for monks working alone. The seeds smell faintly like maple syrup when they roast, an olfactory tick-tock. You lean closer, catch a whiff, and file the aroma under time tastes. Bells continue their measured dominion. When Lord's finally echoes, triple chime, longest of the set, candle wicks have shortened to ember nubs, sandglasses stand emptied, and your margin fish boasts 6 companions, one sporting exaggerated yawn bubbles. You set quill aside, blot the last paragraph, and roll shoulders. 10 hours. They passed like a single bell stroke repeated in different keys. You pour the dregs of honeyed milk into the ink water bowl, standard clean-up protocol that lifts sediment. Without wasting drinkable water, then cap the oak gall pot with a cork carved into a sheep's head. Quill tips soak briefly in fresh water, ready for re-trimming after prime. Brother Tian smothers lamp flame with a clay hood. Darkness folds in, velvet and unthreatening, because bells still map its terrain. Footsteps shuffle toward the church. Chant gathers like sunrise under stone ribs. You follow the current, your own steps clicking cadence. Bells draw you onward, not as tyrants, but as caretakers, shepherding both prayer and pen through the labyrinth of night. Tomorrow scholars will pass these lines for style. Tonight, you honor the bells for making them possible. Time served in golden slices wrapped in bronze song. The candles are trimmed, the bells have drifted into the rafters, and you, finally, twist the cork from the ink bottle, time to conjure words from a stew as dark as any Atlantic midnight. Ink beyond black. Monks whisper the phrase with reverence because a page lives or dies by how well pigment clings to flesh of calf. Your first whiff is sharp, metallic, faintly vinegary, like the kiss of iron on a red wine tongue. You peer inside the earthenware pot. Surface ripples catch torchlight, reflecting coppery streaks that wink and vanish. This batch was brewed yesterday in the Abbey's calefactory cauldron. Oak galls crushed to powder, soaked in rainwater, simmered with strands of iron filings, shaved from the blacksmith's horseshoe pile, then brightened by a single splash of local red. For courage, Brother Cleon said, though chemistry explains it as tannin-modulated pH. The mainstream textbooks call this iron gall ink, medieval. Scribes call it immortality in liquid form. Before writing, you must awaken the ink. Settled pigments sink like lazy seabed silt, so you take a slender hazel stick and stir in small spirals, careful not to splash. Tiny bubbles rise, each catching the lamplight like fleeting constellations. A low hiss accompanies every turn. Oak, acids meet iron salts in gentle war, birthing ferrous tannate. The compound that stains parchment first a mossy green, then matures into deep velvet black. Brother Xian sets a grindstone by your elbow, a flat slate dotted with crushed gall powder, and a pinch of copper vitriol. In case you need thicker, he explains. You nod, dip quill, and drag the nib across the stone's edge, loading it with grains so fine they could whisper secrets. A gentle swipe on a scrap reveals a stroke that begins pale olive, then darkens as oxygen enters the dance. Watching it. Ripen is like time-lapse of nightfall in miniature. A mainstream fact anchors you. Iron gall ink became Europe's standard recipe from the 5th to the 19th century. Da Vinci doodled with it, so did Shakespeare, and so does your quill right now. Yet iron comes at a price. Centuries later, its acid may eat parchment, turning holy verses into lace. Conservation labs now scramble to halt this slow self-destruct. Historians still debate whether monks realized the long-term risk or trusted God to outlive chemistry. Parchments reveal both meticulous dilution notes and reckless double-dipping. Time to test flow. You angle your fresh sheet, exhale, and let the quill fall into rhythm. Downstroke firm, upstroke feather-light. Ink pools in micro grooves left by pumice, spreads, then settles. No blot, no bleeds. Success. You tip the page and watch letters shift from olive to charcoal before your eyes, as if dusk paints each letter after you. That living quality charmed scribes and, frankly, sparks joy even for a sleep-deprived visitor like you. Brother Xian pauses beside you, holding a vial of sepia, ink brewed from cuttlefish sacks collected along stormy coves. He offers a tiny brush. For rubrication, if you wish, he says, though sepia is brown, not rubric red, Irish pragmatism at work. You accept, dipping tip into the chocolatey liquid. Its scent, briny and faintly fishy, nudges a grin, a quirky knowledge nugget, Some coastal abbeys trapped squid solely for ink, their monks doubling as reluctant fishermen. The sea repaid their effort. Sepia's warm hue pairs handsomely with iron black, giving manuscripts that signature two-tone depth. You trace a modest drop cap, Q, letting sepia swirl into a half-moon curl, then outline the body with fresh iron gall. The contrast pops against vellum, a duet of earth and ocean. You blot lightly with sheep wool, noting how sepia dries slower, its pigment particles chubbier, refusing to hide in vellum grooves. Patience, as always, is the scribe's unseen tool. Across the desk, Brother Tsian mixes a rarer ink, verdigris green. He dissolves copper sheets in vinegar until the liquid glows like cursed emeralds, then strains it through linen. He will use it sparingly for botanical illustrations. Its colour enchants but corrodes parchment quicker than iron. Scholars excavating ruined abbeys sometimes find pages where leaves painted in verdigris have chewed through, leaving ghost foliage one can see daylight through. Whether monks saw this effect and shrugged, or considered destruction part of divine ephemerality, remains anyone's guess. Returning focus, you adjust ink viscosity with a single bead of honey. Yes, honey, sticky enough to slow flow in winter drafts, antimicrobial enough to stave off mold. Too much, and letters grow wobbly like jellyfish. Too little, and they slash dry like desert tracks. You swirl the pot again. Surface now gleams slightly thicker. Quill dips more eager. Strokes shine fuller. You marvel. A hive's labour now guides scripture. Another obscure tidbit. Some 9th century recipes call for a dash of egg white, whisked in to add gloss. Others add clove oil, giving letters a scent that lingers for decades. Monastic aromatherapy. Your batch lacks these luxuries, yet the scent of oak and iron alone feels ancient enough to slow breaths. Midway through a paragraph, you accidentally flick a microdroplet onto the margin. Instinct tenses, but training steps in. You press a square of pounce, a powder of pulverized cuttlebone, onto the spot. It wicks moisture like thirsty sand, leaving only a faint shadow which you cleverly transform into a tiny monk rowing a coracle. Error turned embellishment. Brother Tsian winks. Salvage is part of the art. Time slides further. Ink darkens from charcoal to deep obsidian. Letters now gleam faintly under horn-softened candlelight. You pause to admire the subtle metallic sheen. Common to well-balanced iron gall, a byproduct of microscopic iron crystals catching firelight. Modern spectroscopy confirms their presence. Medieval eyes just called it ink, shining with its own grace. As quill nears the pot's bottom, sediment thickens. You decide on a quick remix. Pour a thimble of heated vinegar from the candle clock's melting dish, swirl, and the sludge lifts back into suspension. Vinegar stings nostrils but revives pigment. A living ink never truly sleeps. The smell rouses you more gently than coffee. A reminder that monks harnessed chemistry long before Bunsen burners. You sign off the page with a flourished amen in sepia, the curved tail flicking a playful loop around your earlier fish. The ink, still wet, mirrors candlelight like onyx water at dusk. You set the sheet on a drying rack, a cedar plank pierced with wooden pegs. Cedar adds faint perfume and its oils discourage insects. Medieval antibug spray. Fingers black-tipped, you rinse them in a bowl of barley water. The mild starch lifts stains while sparing skin. Soap is scarce luxury. Rivulets swirl cloudy, ink memories drifting down. You watch until they settle, then wipe hands on linen, preparing for the next folio. Ink beyond black, indeed. You've shared its birth, its bloom, its quiet bite, and its shimmering promise of centuries. Each letter now dries into iron skeletons, destined to outlast kings, unless verdigris or acidity or, say, Viking torch decides otherwise. But in this hushed hour, permanence feels plausible, maybe even gentle. You cap the pot, a lying quill beside. It likes sword beside scabbard, and roll your shoulders. Another bell lurks beyond stone, but now you know it will find you ready. Ink revived, quill tempered, mind alert to weave midnight into meaning. Your quill rests, its beak still glistening, with iron-gall triumph, and you turn toward a task that trades midnight shadows for sunrise fire, laying down gold. Nothing, not candle geometry, not spine belts, prepares you for the hush that falls when the gilding kit appears. Brother Cian produces a cedar box barely larger than a songbird's nest. Inside lies a square of leather, a squirrel hairbrush, thin as a wish, and what looks like crumpled dragon breath, gold leaf, hammered to the thickness of a single sigh. First, you ready the cushion, its worn calfskin stretched over felt, flecked with ghostly glints from earlier sessions. You smooth it with the back of your hand so oils won't tarnish the metal. Even today's mainstream restorers know a rogue thumbprint can dull a millennium of shine. Some manuals advise dusting the cushion with powdered rabbit's foot to reduce static, but Cian claims Irish air, forever damp, keeps things grounded. Historians still debate whether moisture truly aided gilding or if scribes simply made lemonade from their perpetual mist. Next comes bowl, the sticky clay base that anchors divinity to parchment. Irish monks mix local red ochre with egg white and a droplet of honey, yes, the same jar that sweetens oatcakes, until it thickens like sunrise soup. You load a boarhair stylus, paint small teardrop pools at the start of paragraph 5, and wait until bowl turns from glossy scarlet to velvet rose. Patience matters. Too wet and gold slides off like butter on a hot griddle, too dry and it refuses to fuse. While waiting, Brother Cian offers a curious tidbit. Some coastal houses added crushed seashell to the bowl, claiming the calcium bonded better. Modern chemistry shrugs but notes the shell's subtle sparkle under X-ray fluorescence. Whether science or seaside superstition, the effect remains beautiful. Time to breathe life into metal. You grip the gilder's knife, really a broad spatula of sharkskin-polished steel, and tease a fragment of leaf onto the cushion. It floats, weightless, a square sun caught mid-yawn. You hold breath. Even blinked drafts might fold it like troubled origami. The squirrel hairbrush earns its keep now. First, you touch it to your cheek, so skin oil barely whispers onto bristles, then hover over the leaf. Static pulls gold upward in slow motion, a solar flare obeying fingertips. The leaf clings trembling. You float the brush above bowl, exhale gently through your nose, and the leaf settles like a silk handkerchief on still water. A tap with a puff of breath persuades wrinkles to lie flat. Instantly, bowl's honey grabs edges, and red clay vanishes under molten yellow. You chase stray corners with the tip, coaxing them to hug contours until the initial, an illuminated E, gleams with newborn halo. Mainstream fact slides in. Insular manuscripts, such as the Book of Kells, carry gold that survives brighter than many continental peers because Irish monks often burnished with wolf-tooth tools, their enamel harder than common bone. You wield a polished dogfish tooth. Wolves are rare now, rocking it over the letter until the surface mirrors lantern flame. Light ricochets across vellum, painting your face in miniature sunset. A sneeze threatens. Your nose tickles with bold dust, so you turn aside, handkerchiefing potential disaster. Quirky knowledge. Certain scriptoria kept small bowls of crushed garlic by the desk. Rubbing a trace on the wrist supposedly quelled sneezes. You try it, dabbing invisible clove essence. Whether placebo or pungent shock therapy, the urge retreats. Medieval aromatherapy scores again. You lay 2 more leaves, this time on tiny starbursts dotting the margin. With each breath delicate transfer, tension melts into wonder. The page now hosts miniature constellations, gold flickering as though mapping secret pilgrim routes. Brother Tsian murmurs that such shimmer guides tired eyes back to line starts during wee hour copying. Historians still debate if the practical aid outweighed pure aesthetic joy. You think beauty is practicality when your night shift lasts a decade. Burnishing finished, you inspect seams. Overlaps create subtle ridges. You take a greased parchment card and whisk away excess gold with quick, confident strokes. Oro Rosso monks call the fluttering waste, destined to gild small icons or perhaps sweeten pigments. Even specks are too sacred to discard. You cup them into a walnut shell whose halves now hold day and night, one side ink black, the other solar dust. A final polish with wolf tooth skates across letters until reflections sharpen enough to show a wobbly version of your candle-lit grin. You realize the page has become its own lantern, able to scatter light long after wax stubs gutter out. Mainstream conservation tests confirm gold leaf reflects UV, protecting adjacent pigments. Monks didn't need spectrometers. They felt it in their retinas. Suddenly a gust sneaks through the arrow's slit, grazing an unanchored leaf. It somersaults toward oblivion, but you catch it mid-air on the brush tip. A spinning coin deciding fate. You press it onto a random bold speck that wasn't there moments ago, improvising a twinkle beside your earlier fish doodle. Error alchemized to accent. Gold forgives in style. Brother Tsian sets the cedar box aside, nodding approval. He explains that some abbots rationed gold strictly, 1 leaf per folio, leading scribes to invent clever illusions. They would punch tiny holes in letters so underlying vellum shone through, mimicking gilt without spending coin. Whether the abbey's accounts or artistic ambition dictated distribution is predictably a debate fueled by both ledgers and legend. You tilt the page, watching glints dance across oak beams overhead, and understand why chroniclers described illuminated texts as scriptura viva, living writing, each tilt a sunrise, each breath a flicker. This is more than decoration, it's kinetic prayer. You slide the folio into the drying rack, spacing it carefully from its iron gall neighbor to avoid cross-contamination. Gold hates lingering acid fumes. Fingers now dusted with invisible wealth, you tap them together, producing a faint metallic whisper. You half-joke that some monks surely swallowed flecks accidentally. Brother Tsian laughs, confirming a rumor of a novice who boasted a gilded stomach worthy of saints. Whether apocryphal or overconfident digestion anecdote, the story sparkles. Lamp. Oil dwindles, gold still glows. You stow tools, sealing leaf scraps in parchment envelopes labeled with the abbey seal, a curled salmon. Another bell looms, prime perhaps, but gold ignores clocks. Its shine is its own hourglass. As you stretch, warmth radiates from the gilded letters back to your face, as if page thanks scribe for coaxing sun to live between margins. You breathe deep, scent of garlic faint beneath beeswax, and realize your heartbeat has synced to something slower, steadier. Maybe the earthen drum of clay bowl drying, maybe the hum of centuries watching through stone. Either way, you step back from the desk, carrying a quiet fire in your chest, knowing that when dawn slips fully into the scriptorium, your page will greet it with mirrored brilliance. The owl's nocturnal question finally meets an answer. Light can be stored on skin as thin as a whisper, provided you write with patience, breath, and a speck of hammered star. The gilded page catches its breath on the drying rack, and you pivot to an inevitable truth every scribe learns before humility. Mistakes happen, ink splutters, spelling falters, or the quill executes an unsolicited cartwheel. Tonight you confront one such hiccup, a rogue iron gall blot near the Dozy, bottom margin no larger than an oat grain, yet glaring like a raven in snowfall. Time to unsheathe the quiet hero of every scriptorium. The lunellum, a crescent-bladed knife polished to moonshine. You retrieve it from the tool roll, its edge honed on slate, finer than a psalmist's patience. The blade curves like a thumbnail, perfect for gliding under error without scalping surrounding letters. Mainstream fact first, medieval correction relied less on scraping off ink and more on shaving into the parchment's upper fibers, lifting pigment while leaving the skin's deeper weave intact. Do it right, and the vellum reseals under gentle burnish. Do it wrong and you carve daylight straight through John's Gospel. No pressure. You anchor the folio beneath two fingertips, angle the lunellum almost flat, and coax the blade under the blot. Tiny curls of calfskin rise whisper-thin, each carrying a smear of dark regret. Your breath slows, spine lengthens, the same posture drill now harnessed for surgery. The owl outside hoots a suspicious encouragement. 3 strokes, 4, then pause. You tilt the sheet toward the horn-filtered candlelight. The stain has faded to a ghost cloud, barely visible unless you squint. Next comes pumice. Brother Tsiana supplies a stick of the volcanic stone ground to chalky nub. You rub it gently over the scraped spot, erasing knife furrows and roughening fibers, so they welcome fresh ink. A faint, earthy scent, like seaside cliffs after rain, floats up. Obscure tidbit, some coastal Irish houses substituted powdered cuttlefish bone for pumice when trade ships ran late. The bone's calcium allegedly cheered the parchment. Whether chemistry or cheerful placebo, historians still toss citations like beach pebbles. Now the academic hot potato, palimpsests. Scholars pore over pages where monks scraped off older texts to reuse vellum, sometimes hiding secular sagas beneath. Sermons. Did Irish houses commit this erasure more often due to limited calf supply, or less, because isolation sheltered them from papal recycling mandates? The debate rages in symposium corridors, fueled by multispectral scans revealing lost epics and even astronomical tables under layers of psalms. Your modest blot won't spawn future dissertations, but it teaches respect for both error and revelation. Scraping complete, you burnish the wound with the back of a dogfish tooth, same tool that moments ago polished gold. Circular motions, coax, fibers flat, heat produced by friction sealing pores like mending cloth. Under candlelight, the scar vanishes. Vellum, like skin, forgives if you apologize fast enough. You run a fingertip over the site. It feels smooth as river-worn pebble. Satisfied, you mix a micro drop of ink diluted with vinegar, ensuring lighter. tone that blends gradually with surrounding text. One careful stroke later, the line reads as though mistake never dared appear. A second mishap lurks elsewhere, a misplaced letter U instead of N. For that, scraping risks damaging adjacent gold starlets, so you deploy Plan B, subpuncting. You place 3 tiny dots beneath the offending letter, signaling to future readers, ignore me. This technique survives in many great manuscripts, turning errors into coded footnotes. Scholars still debate whether the triple dot carried theological nuance or was simply the medieval equivalent of strike through. Either way, it spares vellum the surgeon's knife tonight. You slide the lunellum back into its linen sheath, blade edge wrapped in oiled wool to thwart rust. Iron tools near damp stone can sprout red fuzz overnight. A novice once neglected his knife and sliced a page with a jagged blade that tore vellum like cheesecloth. The memory keeps everyone diligent. For good measure, you prepare a paste of egg. White, beaten, frothy, dab tiniest fleck onto the repaired patch, then press a square of parchment scrap atop it. A few gentle taps of the burnisher and the bandage merges invisibly. The egg's albumin dries clear, granting extra tensile strength. Chemical bonus: proteins bond with tannins, making the fresh ink less likely to feather. Modern conservators mimic this with gelatine sizing, proving breakfast food often doubles as archival wizardry. You sit back, roll shoulders, and let eyes wander to older pages stacked behind the rack. Some bear faint scrape shadows, pale ovals, glowing when light strikes sideways. Far from flaws, they seem artifacts of perseverance, like knots in polished wood, telling storms survived. A small smile forms. Every correction speaks the monk's quiet dialogue with fallibility. Perhaps that's why readers centuries later feel these books breathing. Imperfections wrinkle them into humanity. Brother Tsian joins, placing a tiny pewter cup of nettle tea by your elbow, anti-inflammatory, good for eyes, strained by precision. He tells of a legend. One abbot mandated that each scribe intentionally add a minuscule error per folio, lest pride sprout unchecked. Historians question authenticity, citing no rulebook clause, but the tale nonetheless dances through lecture halls, reminding modern perfectionists that humility inks the deepest wisdom. As tea warmth seeps, you examine the lunellum's mirror polish. In its curved silver, you glimpse candle flame, distant gold flecks, maybe a hint of your own midnight-touched grin. You realize that while writing carves thought onto skin, scraping sculpt skin back into possibility, a reversible dialogue between intention and chance. Posture keeps the body steady, bells steady the hour, but it is the penknife that steadies the heart, teaching that even stumbles can shimmer if tended with care. Outside, rain begins in earnest, drumming muffled timpani. On the cloister roof, another chapter's soundtrack. For now, you sip nettle, close your eyes, and let the soft percussion verify that your repairs hold fast. The page dries, newly intact. The night continues, newly imperfect. You breathe, newly patient. The rain keeps a steady patter on the slate roof, soft as a smith's hammer striking wool. You've mended ink blots and coaxed gold into starlight, but another opponent creeps up your forearm, the slow, throbbing clamp of muscle fatigue. 10 hours of miniature calligraphy and microscopic scraping have set your fingers buzzing like a jar of sleepy bees. Time, then, for the ancient art of self-maintenance, cramps and cures, monk edition. You close the knife roll, rotate wrists outward until knuckles crack like hushed firecrackers, and lift your hands toward the candle halo. In the glow, fingertips look bruised with indigo, a badge of honor, but circulation begs mercy. The first remedy is simple and free: motion. You extend each finger, drawing invisible circles through the air, a slow aerial ballet. The move comes straight from the Monita Monachorum, a 9th century Irish handbook that devotes an entire chapter to the choreography of quills. Mainstream scholars agree these exercises reduce tendon strain long before modern ergonomics, though historians still debate whether the author invented them or copied older Mediterranean physiotherapy scrolls lost to damp. Brother Cian reappears with his apothecary satchel. From it, he withdraws a pewter flask of lavender-infused linseed oil, warmed earlier by the hearth. The scent rises, herbal, slightly sweet, and tinged with earthy smoke, and you pour a coin-sized pool into your palm. Rubbing hands together, you feel warmth seep into joints, lavender vapors threading up nasal passages until vision swims pleasantly. Contemporary medical journals would cite linalool as the muscle-easing compound. Medieval monks simply called it God's hush-bottled, you knead thumbs into the meat of opposing palms. Tiny sparks shoot along nerve paths, pain giving way to prickle, prickle dissolving into gentle heat. Between presses, you flex each finger back toward the wrist, counting 5 heartbeats before release. A quirky sideline emerges from Cian, some scriptoria brewed willowbark tea, rich in salicin, aspirin's ancestor, for scribes who'd written their halos crooked. The phrase refers to the myth that saints developed literal gold arcs above their heads from constant penance. Posture. Whether anyone truly cramped a halo straight is doubtful, but the willow tea was real. A few abbey receipts list white bark decoction under winter supplies. Cramp relief moves to stage 2, the nettle tea lingering in your pewter cup. Yes, the same stinging weed kids avoid barefoot, now a tonic. You sip cautiously. Nettle tastes like spinach with a mineral kick. It floods muscles with magnesium and iron, says the 20th century nutritionist in your brain, but you prefer Brother Cian's explanation. It convinces the blood to sing louder. Either way, heat radiates down forearms, unwinding tension, one slow bass note at a time. Now for the strangest cure in the abbey arsenal: eel skin wraps. From the satchel, Cian produces a narrow strip of tanned, translucent leather, once a silver, eel cruising tidal flats. He winds it around your right wrist, ties a reef knot, and nods. Eel oil residues, he claims, warm tissues deeper than wool, and there's anecdotal proof in the margin glosses of the lives of the Irish saints, where a scribe notes, "My quill swims as swift as the creature whose coat guards my pulse." Modern biochemists raise an eyebrow, but acknowledge eel fat's unusual lipid profile. Placebos, like parchment, have layers. As joints loosen, you reach for a polished ash rod, part rolling pin, part pressure baton. You trap it under palms and roll back and forth, kneading flexor tendons against wood grain. The rod bears shallow grooves carved by generations of scribes, each groove a fossilized ache. One groove seems deeper than the rest. Cian says it belonged to Brother Malachi, who copied the book of Isaiah twice in a single winter after a lightning bolt reduced the first version to ash. Scholars doubt the speed record, but admit charred oak remains found near the old bell tower match the legend's timeline. Post-stretch, you test dexterity by drumming fingers on the desk in quick succession, index to pinky, pinky to index, while glancing at the candle flame. Beats align with breath, fingertips glow orange in reflected light, Cramps retreat like mice at dawn. You can almost hear sinews sigh relief. To seal the session, you dip a clean porcupine quill into warmed beeswax and paint thin stripes across knuckles, an insulating film against damp. Quirky fact: archaeologists find wax residues on bone styluses in Irish bogland hoards, suggesting field scribes carried similar salves. Whether they wrote battle rosters or love spells remains muddy, quite literally, but their finger armor matches yours tonight. A bell tolls Prime's distant call, gentler than matins but still authoritative. Cian unties the eel's strip, folds it meticulously, and hands you a linen square scented with mint vinegar for a final wipe. Muscles now feel pliable as fresh curd. The quill between your fingers balances lighter, sharper, eager. You realize Cramps are less an interruption and more a stanza in the monk's long poem. Pause, breathe, mend, continue. Before returning to script, you carve a tiny marginal note beside the newly gilded starburst, 3 looping letters, MLR, short for Manus Laetitiae Restituta, hand restored to joy. Future students will puzzle over the abbreviation, footnotes will blossom, and the night's ache will live on as scholarly curiosity, a fitting afterlife for a fleeting pain. You straighten the waist belt, settle onto the bench, and raise the quill. Fingers glide without complaint, ink flows obediently. Outside, rain hushes to drizzle. Inside, a new hush forms, one of loose joints, hot tea, and lavender still ghosting the air. The owl, now soggy, postpones its questions. You place nib to vellum, and the script picks up mid-sentence as if Cramps never existed, just another silence the Abbey taught you to fill with grace. Quill poised, joints loose, you let the quiet roll back in, only this time the silence arrives already wearing a soundtrack. From the stone nave a low humming pulse drifts, thick as honey. The monks are warming their throats for Prime, and they start not with grand anthems, but a single held note that vibrates straight through mortar. It settles behind your sternum, like a second heartbeat, and before you know it, your quill tip rises and falls in perfect synchrony. Monastic chant, you quickly realize, is less background music and more metronome wrapped in theology. Each syllable lengthens or shortens according to neum marks, those curious hooks and blobs marching over words in the choir's antiphonary. Mainstream musicologists will tell you that neumes predate staff notation. They sketch contours rather than exact pitches, leaving monks to fill in the missing mathematics with muscle memory. Irish scriptoria added their own flair, peppering margins with quirky signums to signal ornamentation, tiny flicks that look like birds' footprints. Historians still debate whether these regional twirls were born of Celtic folk cadences or simply creative scribes looking to stay awake. The chant swells into the psalm indirectum via justorum. The path of the righteous is straight, fitting motto for someone lining letters in arrow-true rows. You'd laugh if your lungs weren't busy resonating, because every downstroke seems to land exactly on the stressed syllable, as though the choir reaches out and taps your wrist. You see now why Brother Cian keeps his desk so near the choir door. The voice tide dictates tempo better than any hourglass. Quirky tidbit surfaces as Cian leans over to share a conspiratorial whisper. The Abbey once had a novice who copied entire folios in syncopation with the flock of geese outside, claiming their honks formed a natural tonic solfa. The supervising cantor disagreed, and the novice spent Lent scraping bird-imprinted flourishes off margins. Ever since, choirmasters here have invited actual geese into the cloister on feast days, allegedly to remind scribes what a bad metronome sounds like. Whether legend or honking truth, scribbles shaped like feathers do appear in certain misaligned pages. Rhythm established, you notice breathing follows suit. Inhale for the opening, ascending phrase. Exhale as melody settles. The effect is a subtle biofeedback loop. Breath tethers hand, hand steadies quill, quill mirrors chant, chant guides breath again. Hours could pass like this, beads on a rosary of syllables. Indeed, scientific studies centuries later will show that repetitive song lowers heart rate and synchronizes cardiac coherence. Monks figured it out by ear. As the choir glides into a kyrie, Brother Xian taps a tuning fork, ivory handle, bronze prongs, against his desk, then places its vibrating foot on the parchment edge. You feel microquakes ripple under your palm, 440 Hz, translated into tactile Morse. He calls this trick the silent umpire. If your strokes drift off tempo, the buzz reminds you to realign. You wonder if the tuning fork counts as avant-garde for the 9th century, but Xian explains monks have long used resonant bones, goat tibias strung with horsehair, to transfer pitch through wood. You try humming along, a soft drone, nothing that would scandalize a choir stall. Immediately your writing smooths, ascenders rise evenly, descenders dip to a shared depth like synchronized swimmers. Each completed word feels stamped, not scribbled, as if rhythm hammered it into vellum. You recall a scholastic anecdote. Charlemagne supposedly ordered scribes to chant under their breath to achieve uniform calligraphy across the realm. Historians bicker about authenticity. No decree survives, but your wrist votes yes on efficacy. Between verses, the choir modulates key. You listen for the moment the melody pivots, then pivot your quill in sympathetic flourish, adding a playful serif to the next capital. It's like slipping a grace note into plainchant, subtle enough to avoid abbotly eyebrows, yet joyful. You sense Brother Xian's smiling approval without ever lifting his gaze. Even restrained artistry done to tempo earns silent applause. Suddenly a neume-rich responsory echoes, its quick, melismatic run stretching vowels like taffy. Your quill answers with elongated ligatures where letters weave above and below the baseline, thin strokes mingling like vines. Mainstream paleography confirms Irish insular scripts adore such knots. Chant probably reinforced the habit, letting scribes sing with pen when voice needed rest. Whether script-influenced song or song-sculpted script is another ongoing debate, like asking which came first, ink or parchment. The choir pauses for a breath the length of a sparrow blink. That gap, that pin-drop nothingness, jolts you with more power than sound. You realize consonants benefit from silence as much as vowels from melody. Prompted, you leave a deliberate hair-thin space between two sentences, a visual rest, instead of the usual point. Future editors may puzzle over your intentional lacuna, footnotes will sprout, conferences convene, but you and the chant understand, silence is letter-shaped music. Rain resumes, syncopated tap against window slit. The choir folds it into their phrasing, and so do you, elongating a crossbar here, tightening a loop there. Page becomes acoustic diary. You grin at the absurd grace of mapping weather into scripture. A modern typographer might call it responsive design. You call it a good night's work. Prime ends on a plagal cadence, monks trail off into hush, and the tuning fork still hums faintly, a memory of pitch. You dampen its vibration with a finger, the page absorbs the last tremor, and suddenly your own heartbeat sounds louder than bells. Writing slows, but line spacing stays perfect. residual rhythm echoing in bone and ink. Before the choir disperses, you add a final marginal note, a tiny pair of eighth notes, black diamonds with quills for stems. Inside one note head, you tuck the letters TPQ for tempus per quillum, time through the quill. Maybe a future musicologist will smile at the pun, maybe not. Either way, the chant has etched itself into the parchment's fibers, into your posture, into muscle memory that will reawaken at the first hint of matins tomorrow night. You lay quill aside, stretch neck side to side, slow, metered, in rhythm still. No cramps, no blotches, not even a rebellious sneeze. The owl outside has gone silent. Perhaps it too listens for distant reverberations. You stack finished leaves, 1, 2, 3, each line a stave, each serif a note, and feel the room settle into restful hush. Chant as metronome, and indeed, music has paced a river of words across vellum, carrying thought with effortless current. And though the song ends, its pulse lingers in the ink, quietly drumming until the next bell wakes both page and pen. Rain arrives in earnest, a long, low hiss, sliding across the slate roof like a giant hand smoothing parchment. You pause, quill lifted, as droplets tick, 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 first scattered, then disciplined, becoming a drumming pattern so tight it feels composed. The whole abbey vibrates at this new tempo. Candle flames tremble in sympathy. Ink ripples lazy circles in its pot, and somewhere a loose shutter taps counter rhythm. Outside, Atlantic mist curls over bog and heath, bringing the smell of wet turf and sea salt right through the arrow slits. You inhale, and for a blink, the scriptorium smells less like vellum and beeswax, more like seaside dawn on a fishing quay. Rain is no stranger here. Mainstream climatology reminds you that early medieval Ireland averaged more than 200 wet days a year. Scholars link that moisture to the extraordinary preservation of monastic pigments. Damp air kept paint layers from cracking. Yet historians still debate whether the same humidity encouraged mold that later forced monks to scrape and repolish pages. Some parchment shows faint tide mark stains, others glimmer pristine. Tonight you simply note how the rain dampens dust and hushes distant creaks, turning the scriptorium into a padded chamber perfect for slow work. Drip cadence seeps under your skin. You start writing again, letting each vertical stroke coincide with a roof beat. The effect is hypnotic, rain calligraphy, water dictating ink. Your letters seem to sprout tiny droplets at their tips, blooming serifs that widen a hair more than usual, as if they too enjoy stretching in the damp. You recall Brother Cian's aside, "Wet weather fattens letters," a joke hiding truth. Quills absorb airborne moisture, making strokes fractionally bolder. Some paleographers can identify winter folios by their slimmer script. Summer storm. Pages like this one appear plumper, heartier. Another quirky fact surfaces: the monk's rain gauge. At the far corner of the room, a narrow copper funnel leads to a graduated jar. Every bell, a novice notes rainfall depth. Centuries later, historians will call these notes Europe's earliest continuous precipitation log. Whether monks meant climate science or just wanted to predict when their laundry might dry is unclear, but tables of aqua celestis still survive in dusty archivists' drawers. A gust sneaks through the open slit, spattering a mist over your fresh folio. No harm. Vellum loves a quick face wash, but ink could blur if you ignore it. You reach for the horn pane kept nearby, hinge it across the slit, and latch the iron hook. Horn diffuses light into soft amber, blocks sideways spray, and steals none of the sea air perfume. You remember reading that some remote cells used translucent fish bladder when horn was scarce, though modern curators rarely encounter surviving examples. Fish membrane shrivels too fast. Debated sources describe windows that smell of cod long after Christmas, which might explain brisk winter ventilation rules. With rain sealed out, you adjust candle wicks, shorten them to counter draft, and drop a grain of salt on each molten pool. Salt absorbs stray moisture, preventing sputter. The sizzle is as satisfying as rain itself. You marvel how sea and script trade favors. Ocean gives salt, salt calms wax, wax steadies flame. Flame reveals letters that tell of sea again. The rhythm invites memory. You picture earlier monks trudging across the cloister, cloaks soaked, parchments tucked under waxed leather, praying the damp hasn't seeped through. Some abbeys allegedly treated pages with a whisper-thin egg tempera wash to repel water, a practice modern conservation labs verify under UV fluorescence. Yet scrolls from drier inland houses rarely show such coating, which fuels academic debate over whether coastal climate pushed innovation or if certain abbot chemists simply loved an experiment. Rain thickens. Individual drips merge into sheet, sliding off gutters, a continuous hush, like distant surf. Your quill moves faster now, surfing that sound. Words stack in even terraces, fish doodles at margins, gain little umbrellas. You laugh softly. Ink barely quivers. Humour belongs here. Monks used play to survive repetition. One margin in the Book of Leinster hosts a monk's lament that the weather is so wet, even the ducks seek higher scripture. Another page. Later, someone else doodled a duck reading a psalter. Tradition upheld. Brother Tian returns carrying a shallow pine tray. Inside lie strips of linen lightly toasted on the hearth, scriptorium towels. He drapes one over your shoulders. Warmth pulls across neck muscles. The towel smells faintly of peat smoke and rosemary, an accidental potpourri. You realize how sensory layering, rain, smoke, herb, ink, keeps the mind alert without jarring it awake. Perhaps this was the monk's caffeine before coffee sailed. North. He sets the rain log on your desk so you can mark the hours total. You dip the tiny tally quill, crow feather, quick drying, and jot Vi modi pluviae beside the line. Measurement notations vacillate between Roman modi and local Muid confusing later meteorologists. Footnotes will wrestle with conversion tables, but you simply move on, satisfied the sky's generosity is documented. Sitting back, you press thumb and forefinger together, feeling how skin sticks a tad from humidity. You test ink flow. It's still silk, but caution says add a drop of honey to bind excess water vapor. The honey jar rests on the windowsill, syrup thick despite the chill. One drop, swirl, and ink regains that night-black density monks call Crow's midnight cloak. Rain slows. Roof drips revert to earlier tick-tock. Through horn pane, the first pastel hint of dawn blends with mist, like peach ink, bleeding into wet paper. You stretch, feeling that leisure-dense hour between downpour and sunrise, a space where nothing demands hurry. Even the owl, likely drenched, has surrendered its questions. Time for a tiny indulgence. You lift a fresh vellum scrap, sketch the cloister roof in cartoon silhouette, add rain streaks, then script beneath, pluvius dotet. The rain teaches. Maybe centuries hence, a researcher will stumble over the doodle and smile, imagining storm-bound scribes drawing comics. Let them. History needs its rainy day margins. You file finished folios, airing them on cedar pegs so gentle draught dries. Residual damp. Gold letters catch nascent dawn, blinking like sleepy lighthouses. You whisper a quick thanks to the storm for rinsing dust, to the slate roof for drumming rhythm, and to the horn pane for shielding lines from puddle destiny. The abbey exhales, stone vapor drifting upward as indoor air warms. Quill returns to its stand. You cradle the linen towel, debating whether to keep or return it, then fold it neatly. Monks track textiles like coins. Rain ceases entirely, only gutter swirls trickle like distant harp arpeggios. Another bell will come soon, but right now the world hovers in hush, pages drying, muscles relaxed, sky pale. You take one more breath of seawater parfum, then lean forward, ready to catch the first lark note with the next letter you write. The sky now hangs in linen grey folds, neither fully day nor stubborn night, and the scriptorium stretches its limbs the way a cat does after an overly serious sermon. Your folios, freshly dried, lean in a tidy fan across the rack, but something in the neatness feels incomplete. A whisper of mischief rises just as larks tune their first tentative notes. You glance at the blank lower margin of the page you just finished. The stretch of untouched vellum resembles an empty stage begging for a solo. The quill tilts in your fingers like a co-conspirator. Across centuries of scholarship, one mainstream fact stands tall. Irish manuscripts burst with marginalia, dancing hares, gossiping monks, knights, dueling snails, visual footnotes that wobble between the sacred and the silly. Illuminators claimed these frolics guarded the text from monotony, though some abbots muttered about ink squandered on whims. Historians still debate whether every doodle held coded commentary, or whether many were simply the medieval equivalent of doodling during a staff meeting. Tonight, you lean toward play for play's sake. You dip the quill, lightly this time, into sepia, opting for a friendlier hue than Iron Gall's thundercloud black. One slow curve, 2 whisker flicks, and a plump cat begins to loaf in the corner. Its eyes half close in that smug, rain is for humans way, tail curled like the letter G. The cat's grin tilts just wide enough to mirror yours. Marginal cat complete. A quirky knowledge gem surfaces. A 10th century gloss from the monastery of Clonmacnoise reports a cat named Pangur Ban who stalked ink-drunk moths by candlelight. His scribe companion penned a poem comparing their mutual hunts, he for words, the cat for mice. Pangur Ban lives in anthologies now, proof that feline co-workers kept medieval desks lively. You title your doodle Ban's cousin in minuscule beneath its paws as a silent nod to that partnership. You test the ink's dryness with the back of a fingernail, no smear, perfect. The cat now demands a setting, so you add a miniature lectern tipped sideways, sheet music resting on it, a visual pun that the cat is preparing to chant. 2 spare neumes float above its head like musical thought bubbles. You wonder if future readers will decode the joke. Maybe a paleographer will spin an article on feline liturgical imagery in early insular manuscripts. Stranger theses exist. In the next folio you sneak a frog armed with a quill lance poking a helmeted snail. The motif isn't random. Scholars catalogue over 40 snail night scenes in British Isles codices, sparking wild theories, from satire on slow papal bureaucracy to allegories of pride. Your version? Simply comic relief in an overtime shift. Still, you dutifully mark 3 sub-puncting dots beneath the illustration, so future correctors know the scene is intentional, not a stray blot metamorphosed. Brother Kian strolls by, eyes twinkling. He never scolds trims of whim. He knows that, after 10 hours, levity oils discipline. He does, however, hand you a small dry brush, horsehair, used for dusting eraser crumbs. "Keep stray gold specks off your beasts," he murmurs. "Good point. Last thing you need is an accidental gilded frog distracting a bishop." Gently you sweep debris and the frog's grin shines unencumbered. Mainstream codicology reminds us that these playful sketches sometimes served mnemonic duties. A cat might mark the start of a beloved psalm. A jug-eared monk caricature could warn of a tricky grammatical form. Whether your cat will flag a key theological twist or simply nap beside, it is honestly tomorrow's editor's puzzle. You're content to let curiosity ripple down the centuries. Rain subsides to mist, turning the horn window pane into milky glass. In that hazy light, your doodles acquire a dreamy softness, as though halfway between ink and breath. You pause to massage fingers, residual lavender oil still lingers, and glance at the cedar rack. Folios gleam, margins giggle. A certain balance settles. Solemn columns of scripture anchored by tiny rebels at their feet. A sudden drip from the ceiling lands perilously close to your ink pot. You shuffle tools aside, then blot the spot with linen. The drop leaves a faint watermark shaped oddly like a rabbit. Inspiration strikes. On a scrap of parchment you outline the silhouette, fill it with oak gall wash, then trim it into a tiny cutout. A pop-up rabbit now peeks over your finished page's top edge, ears pricked toward a psalm heading. Pop-ups aren't common until centuries later, but monks did paste flaps to hide corrections or secret prayers. You rationalize your rabbit as a liftable mnemonic marker. Innovation, medieval edition. Brother Cian laughs, notes the drizzle rabbit, phenomenon in the rain log, and suggests adding a Latin pun, pluvia cuniculorum, rain of rabbits. You tuck the phrase under the rabbit's paws. Perhaps some future weather historian will spend an afternoon deciphering why rabbits torrented from the sky on this particular vigil. A lull in rain again. The owl resumes low questions. And somewhere, in the nave, a monk coughs that long, post-psalm cough known to everyone who's sung on damp mornings. You feel the night thinning, dawn pressing pastel fingers against the window. 2 folios remain unfinished, yet your mind hums lightly, powered by cat smiles and frog jousts more than honeyed nettle. You realize marginalia are less distraction than breathing room, visual commas giving eyes a place to rest, heads a moment to tilt sideways. Before you dive back into sober text, you ink a final doodle, a pair of spectacles perched on air, lenses, empty circles. An anachronism, eyeglasses won't reach these islands for another century, but a private wink to future readers. Beneath it, you write, in Gaelic, minuscule, Dulch luasa dunta, dulshuile oscailte, with ears closed, with eyes open. The motto suggests reading in quiet. Modern scholars may puzzle, but perhaps smile. You smile now. Cat, frog, rabbit, ghost glasses, margins now glow with a micro-menagerie. Yet the scripture stands unaffected like a calm teacher letting children doodle along the page edges so long as homework stays neat. You feel lighter, tension gone, posture still upright. Whimsy, it turns out, may carry as much restorative power as lavender oil or nettle tea. You set quill down, shake wrists once more, and sip the last of cooled nettle. Dawn pushes grey into pale gold, candle halos pale back. You stack your whimsical folios and gold starbursts wink approval, Somewhere an abbot might frown at excessive levity, but centuries later a curator might laugh, and beyond that maybe a sleepless YouTube listener will drift off, imagining cats singing Latin under a rainy Irish roof. If so, mission accomplished. The sky brightens toward pewter blue, but in your mind another hue intrudes. The cold steel flash of a longship prow. Between quill strokes, you catch yourself scanning the arrow slit, half expecting striped sails to crest the boggy horizon. That lurking tension isn't paranoia, it's muscle memory woven into Irish monastic life. You whisper a quiet mantra: seed, cave, salver, yield, beware, safeguard, and begin the time-honored ritual of securing finished folios against raiders. Mainstream chronicles place the first Viking strike on Irish soil around 795 CE, and for up 2 brutal centuries dragon-headed ships prowled the coast, hungry for gold, grain, and, yes, books. Parchment might seem low-value plunder, but ornate bindings flaunted jewels, plus vellum made excellent sail patches. Monks responded with a playbook, equal parts logistics and legend, turf burial caches, stone-walled scripture towers, even decoy chests stuffed with damp sheep wool. Historians still debate how widespread each tactic was. Chronicles describe miraculous survivals, yet archaeology uncovers surprisingly few hidden manuscript hoards. Perhaps monks moved treasures so often that caches became moving targets, leaving scant trace. Brother Cian spreads a wax-sealed inventory sheet beside your folios. Each page bears a hatch mark, gold stars noted with tiny symbols, marginalia logged by cryptic doodle code, frog, sex F, cat, C, rabbit, R. Should alarms ring, this list lets scribes verify what escapes and what sinks beneath peat. You sign. At the bottom, Quill, trembling only slightly. An oath that this night's labor will not vanish uncounted. Next, he opens a low cedar chest banded with iron. Inside, a linen sling cradles a stoneware jar of pitch and a coil of rawhide cord. Monks here favor the coracle scroll method, roll folios around a cedar dowel, cocoon them in waxed linen, then lash the bundle beneath a lightweight coracle, those hide-clad boats bobbing on nearby streams. When raiders storm ashore, the coracle is shoved downstream, drifting to a pre-mapped peat bog inlet until danger passes. Quirky fact, some annals mention monks training otters to nudge precious coracles inland with gentle snouts. A detail modern zoologists eye skeptically, yet carved otter motifs repeat suspiciously often on rescued bindings. You kneel, easing folios into rolling position. Gold leaf catches newborn sun, flicking farewells as pages spiral around the dowel. A stripe of pitch seals outer linen, resin scent sharp as pine cider. Rawhide knots cinch tight, each knot's tail snipped with your lunellum. Blade now knighted, from error surgeon to escape engineer. Cian gestures toward the tower stair. A narrow corkscrew of uneven treads rising into gloom. You hoist the bundle, weight surprisingly slight, and follow him upward. Stone walls sweat damp cold. Every 8th step bears carved crosses, counting markers so monks could climb in blackout nights without lamps. Halfway, you pass a slit, wider than the rest, angled downriver like an archer's aim. Here, Cian pauses, listens. Only the river's hush replies. Good. No splash of oar against tide yet. At the tower's crown, a squat door opens onto the weather-blasted walkway. Wind slaps your cloak. Air smells of salt and heather. Below, the narrow tributary gleams pewter. its course looping into reeds. You and Tsian set the coracle on mossy stone. It's a mere arm span across, oak laths ribbed beneath rawhide hull, tar black and shining. A wooden toggle inside matches notches carved into the bundle's dowel, twist, and the manuscript locks in place, a buoyant book safe. Mainstream architectural studies show round towers often doubled as lighthouse and vault, their elevated doors accessible only by ladder, delayed raiders long enough for monks to dispatch coracle flotillas. Whether these towers were primarily built for bell ringing or book rescue is contested, but here function merges. You lower the coracle with a hemp pulley rig, watching it kiss the river like a silent swan. Water lilies shiver, dew beads scatter. Freed, it drifts down current, cloak of fog swallowing hull. Somewhere, a reed warbler chirps as if logging departure coordinates. Tsian marks the moment on a wax tablet. Tide height, bell interval, wind direction. Data that will guide retrieval tonight, assuming coastlines remain unlit by flames. Back inside, you descend, heart light, but pulse quick. A second chest waits. For dummy folios, parchment scraps wrapped around ashwood boards painted with diluted ochre to mimic gold. These decoys draw greedy eyes while real treasure rides the river. You stack them on the desk, arranging cat doodles prominently. Perhaps a plunderer will assume monks stored only joke books and move on. Another line of defense sits near the hearth, an earthen pitcher of fresh, sour milk mixed with bog iron filings. Spill this on blank vellum and within hours it oxidizes into ugly brown blooms, rendering pages worthless to resale markets. Ink of thorns, scribes call it, a self-destruct cocktail reserved for last resorts. You hope tonight's skies stay clear of sails, so the pitcher remains sealed. Rain thins to mist. Sunlight finally pierces clouds, painting cloister stones with silver stripes. You and Tsian stand by the open arrow slit, scanning horizon. Nothing but gulls pinwheeling above distant breakers. Relief settles, tempered by readiness. Vigilance never clocks out. Before returning to your bench, you carve a tiny longship silhouette in the margin beside Psalm 46. Deus noster refugium, God is our refuge. Under it, you ink two Gaelic words, Slan Sabailte, safe and sound. Maybe a future reader, leafing centuries later, will trace that ship and feel the pulse of a night when ink, gold, and silent river combined to outwit steel and fire. You rub sore shoulders, noticing muscles no balm can reach, those woven from anticipation. Yet pride flickers. Your pages float somewhere in morning fog, words intact, cat still purring in margin. Owl hush fades, lark chorus swells. The abbey exhales. As bells ring for terce, time to descend, wash pitch from fingernails and coax fresh lines out of your goose-feathered accomplice. But part of you drifts downstream with the coracle, hugging curves of reeds, whispering to otters real or imagined, keep watch, carry story, dodge raiders, sail on. Mid-morning slants through the scriptorium, scattering prisms where last night's candles left beads of wax on the horn pane. You wash pitch from your nails in a cedar basin, scrubbing until the river smell gives way to rosemary. Everything feels newly alert, ink jars corked, quills trimmed, margins alive with cats, frogs and rain rabbits. But the room itself is oddly subdued, as if holding its breath for news of the coracle. You settle at the desk for a different labor, copying the colophon that will anchor this choir's provenance across centuries. The colophon is part receipt, part diary, part whispered hope. You begin with the mainstream formula every paleography student memorizes, finished in the year of grace under the protection of St. Columba. Yet Irish custom invites personality, so you add your name in humble lowercase, plus the local weather log, 6 measures of rain, and a line crediting Brother Cian, who tempered the ink and steadied the bells. Scholars 1,000 years hence will underline those details, tracing climate curves and monastic networks. Whether they will decipher your frog doodle is, of course, the scholarly gamble. Halfway through the note, you slip a quirky statistic, the Abbey's hive count. 43 active hives, 15 asleep for winter, 3 lost to a badger last month. Why include bees? Because gold leaf, candle wax, and ink binder all owe a debt to buzzing wings. Marginal beekeeping data appears in several insular manuscripts. Entomologists today mine them for medieval pollinator histories. Some historians still debate whether such figures were symbolic honey metaphors or genuine ledgers, but every jar of beeswax in your toolkit tips the scales toward practicality. You finish with a prayer disguised as a joke. May any raider who opens this book find his sword turned into a plowshare and his thirst into a love of letters. A sentiment both pacifist and mischievous, enough to raise a grin in a Viking hall, you hope, if not an eyebrow. A quick blot with sheep wool seals the ink. The page dries like a warm promise. Outside, a low trill of pipes drifts in. The shepherd. Boys on the hill greeting clear weather. You catch Brother Cian's silhouette at the doorway, hand cupped to ear, listening for a splash downstream. Minutes later he returns, breath misting, eyes bright, coracle retrieved, bundle dry, no longships. On the horizon. Relief floods the room so completely even the candles seem to burn steadier. The inventory slate updates, folios secured, river duty complete. The owl finally sleeps, the larks inherit full custody of the sky. You stow tools, lunellum in-oiled, wool, pumice stick in bone tube, tuning fork in its ivory sheath. Each item hums with memory, scraping, stretching, vibrating, healing, all pieces of a single, slow craft. Modern conservators will one day marvel at how few tools achieved so much permanence. Their digital microscopes will spot the lavender, oils, honey residues, and maybe even eel lipids embedded in fibers, but they'll never fully feel the chant reverberating through wrist bones or the rain teaching letter width. That's fine. The manuscript itself will hum what instruments can't hear. Before closing the desk, you tuck a final Easter egg under the choir's last leaf. A strip of horn inscribed with today's moon phase, a waning crescent etched beside, a smiling cat. Astronomers might call it trivial, manuscript hunters will call it gold. Historians still debate why such lunar glyphs appear sporadically across Hiberno-Latin texts. Were they scribing calendars or simply noting candle nights? You decide to leave future scholars a riddle worth at least one conference panel. The bell for sext rings. Clear, confident, relieved. You roll your shoulders, realizing dawn's silver has matured into honest daylight. Somewhere in the kitchen, butter sizzles on oatcakes. Nettle tea cools for the noon pour. Brother Cian thanks you in a whisper. Speaking loudly now would feel like dropping a stone in a glass lake, and heads off to prepare lecture notes on ink chemistry for younger novices. He pauses at the door to add your name to the scriptorium. Rota. 10-hour vigil complete. Your cheeks warm. Fatigue wraps around you like a patched blanket. equal parts weight and comfort. The quill waits in its stand, freshly sharpened. You stroke its barbs once, gratitude for feathers traded for scripture, and turn away. The scriptorium, once flickering gold, now glows steady amber. It will survive the next storm, the next raid, the next generation's taste in marginal doodles. And somewhere downstream, a coracle naps in sedge beds, secret cargo safe until twilight retrieval. Words, like rivers, keep their own slow promises. The abbey settles into a midday hush, yet the night's rhythm lingers inside you like a low, pleasing hum. Picture it now, the candles long extinguished, vellum cooling under cedar lids, cat doodle curling into a nap. Outside, bog cotton sways in a breeze that smells of distant peat fires and salt, the kind of wind that combs heather fields and whispers, "You don't have to keep your eyes open much longer." Let that wind drift into your room. Feel it tuck around, shoulders, brushing away bright screen static and the day's last sharp edges. Every breath arrives like a quiet bell stroke, every exhale the soft scrape of a lunellum smoothing small mistakes. In the background you might hear a memory of rain, steady, sure, as if the slate roof now spans right above your bed, guarding your own small scriptorium of dreams. Imagine the coracle in its reed cradle, manuscript safe, otters, real or mythical, keeping watch. Words float there in moonlit equilibrium, needing nothing from you until dawn. So you can let muscles unweave, unclasp the waist strap of your thoughts, and allow posture to soften into whatever shape sleep prefers. If a stray concern splashes like a longship's oar, just nudge it downstream. There's always another inlet of calm to ferry it away. And if a gold starburst flickers behind closed lids, that's only the page saying thank you, promising to keep its gentle light glowing while you drift deeper. Rest easy. The bells are silent, the quills at rest, and every margin creature has found a warm pocket of parchment to curl inside. All is scribbled, all is sealed, all is safely tucked beneath the hush of heather and tide.